A lot of relatives that have passed away have been seen time and time again. Either they're seen or they do something to let us know that they are there. My aunt, who was a spoiled brat at the time, got the hell scared out of her by her grandparents who visited her after they passed. Her grandpa sat on her bed with her while her grandmother threw a picture. She began to behave and she never saw them again. My uncle Eddie was the first. He passed away from a gunshot wound in the Marines. It was murder, not in the line of duty, and no one ever knew what happened, even now. I never met him because he died in 1994 and I was born in 1997, but my mom told me all about it. The day of his funeral, it both snowed and rained on the same day. She said it was surreal. That alone wasn't what makes us think he visited. My mom told me that the night before the funeral ended, she had a dream. She saw who did it, what car he drove, and where he lived. She said it was like Eddie was telling her what happened involving his death. After he died, his picture was placed in a porcelain picture frame with a music box in the back of it, and it played The Wind Beneath My Wings, the song that played at his funeral. My experiences start with that. I never knew Eddie, but my mom told me about him. When I was little, I liked that music box, and it held meaning. Well, that thing would play at random times. It was up on a high shelf, so it wouldn't be knocked down easily. And my grandfather was the only one tall enough to reach it, so no one else could really reach it to turn it on randomly. Not only that, my grandmother told me that she'd seen him around the house, or at the cemetery near his grave. My little cousin, Jay, not his real name, is much younger than me, and he looks exactly like Eddie with bright red hair, blue eyes, and lots of freckles. He never met Eddie either, while his older brothers had. My aunt put him to bed one night, and a while later, before she went to bed, she heard Jay laughing in his room, like he was playing with someone. She went in, and he was sitting in his room in the dark on his bed, facing his closet and laughing. Sonia turns on the light and goes over to him and asks what he's doing. He suddenly turned to her and grabbed her arm. Looking her in the eyes, he smiled and said, "I'm Googie." Googie was the nickname my mum gave Eddie when they were little, and she couldn't say good boy to him properly and instead would say Googie. I didn't know about this and had never met Eddie, and Jay is much younger than me, so he definitely shouldn't have known about it. My aunt told me that she had then told him to go to bed and left as quickly as possible to tell her husband, my uncle. Another night, she heard him say, "Go away, Googie, I have to go to sleep." She told me that she had never told Jay about Eddie's nickname. So that, combined with how similar he looks to Eddie, I'm honestly convinced that Jay has some close connection with Eddie we can't explain. The next spirit is actually my mother. She went on a downhill spiral when I was younger and got into prescription drugs. I was taken away from her and sent to live with my dad after I tried to get my mom help. I saw her twice before she passed away. She went to her friend or supplier's house and passed away in the middle of the night. My grandmother and I didn't allow an autopsy. I was 14 and couldn't imagine my mother getting cut up by the doctors. The night I found out she died, I stayed with my grandma. I had a dream that I was walking down a long white staircase that led to a hallway. When I got to the bottom step, I saw my mom walking with another figure that wasn't clear. I tried to catch up, but I couldn't, and then I woke up. My grandma then told me that I had been crying in my sleep. I had a few dreams where my mom would approach me and talk with me, and she even asked me once, "Why don't you tell them that you wanted to stay with me?" The last time I really had an encounter with my mom was one time I saw staying at my aunt's house. My aunt and uncle were in their bedroom. My cousins and their girlfriends were in their rooms, and Jay was asleep in his room. I was on the couch, and the living room faces the kitchen, and in the kitchen there is a bright nightlight that can only be turned on manually. It's not motion censored. I was trying to sleep, and I saw the light go on. I can't sleep, so I decide to see who's up. I walk in and nobody's there. I freaked out and got back on the couch and curled up under the blankets. And, for a reason I don't really know, I began to talk. I started talking to my mom, talking about school, my hobbies, my friends. But when I mentioned my dad, the lights went out. I'm terrified of the dark, and she knew that. I apologized and said I wouldn't bring him up again. A couple minutes later, the light came back on, and I began to talk to her again until I got tired. Then I said goodnight and closed my eyes. A few minutes later, I heard the click of the light, and it didn't come back on for the rest of the night. I'm convinced it was her. The last spirit is my grandma, who died a year after my mom. She died after fighting liver disease for years. She died with everyone around her. She told us all what she wanted us to do with our lives before falling asleep for a few days. She waited until everyone was around her before she passed away. We held her hands. I kept my hands on her leg. We kissed her and told her goodbye, and a few seconds later, she stopped breathing and she was gone. That alone was an impacting experience. The only experience I know of after her passing was at a birthday party for a relative. My cousin Jay, he saw my grandma and her late sister-in-law sitting on the couch watching the guests. According to him, she beckoned Jay over and Jay gave her a hug. He said he could actually feel her, feel warmth coming from her. That's the last I know of with the experiences in the family. I don't know why, but it seems that Jay has the most connection to the spirits. I'm the only one who's seen my mom, and almost all of us have seen one other relative, mostly Eddie. Now, my other aunt, Anne, and her husband, Uncle Dave, and their huge family who live in the trailer next to mine, have started to see weird things going on. It started when my cousin Laura became pregnant. Anne had a different mother from my grandmother, who died in a fire when she was younger. Her name was Marlene, and Laura decided to name her baby girl after Anne's mother. The baby's name is Ava Marlene. From the beginning, weird things happened. A picture of Marlene flew off the wall. The TV has been turning on and off, along with lights and even flashlights around the house. The scariest incident was when my aunt Anne saw a figure by the door, and she began to scream she was terrified. She also said she was half asleep when that happened, so I don't know how real it was. I haven't seen anything since my mom visited me, but I know a weird activity is still happening. I suppose it's just our relatives telling us that they are watching over us. This is about my little niece, who is named Ava. She's actually my second cousin, but her mother, my cousin, told me that I could be her aunt with how close we are. Recently, both Ava's mother and grandmother told me that Ava apparently has an imaginary friend that she's been waking up at night to see and play with. Her mother told me that she has also been feeling watched in the house. Apparently, an elderly woman who lived there before them passed away, so I think it's her playing with Ava. Well, tonight, I was watching Ava while her grandmother was inside for a few minutes. Ava was wearing footy pajamas and no shoes, so I've been carrying her around to put her in her seat when she wants to sit down, so she doesn't hurt her feet. She's 2 years old and doesn't really like being held anymore, since she likes moving around on her own. I asked about her imaginary friend because I was curious, and for a 2-year-old, she was talking clearly, giving me yes or no answers. I asked if she had an imaginary friend, and she said yes. She didn't answer anymore until I asked if her friend was here, and she said no. No big deal. I was watching the fire until she came up to me and moved to sit on my lap and snuggle with me. Remember, she doesn't like being held anymore. She then pointed to the large lawn in front of us and said, "What's that?" I didn't see anything, so I said, "I don't know. I don't see anything." She actually looked at me like I was crazy. She looked around and would point in random directions and say the same thing until she got really startled. like something was in her face and pulled my sleeve, so she was hiding her face in my arm. She began to panic, and I heard the cows next door mooing in distress. She began to cry and wanted her grandma. She says "Ma" to her grandma. I picked her up to take her inside. My house and her grandmother's are next door to each other, with the fire pit in the middle, and we live in the country surrounded by woods. I got about halfway across the yard to get to her grandmother's when she began to panic in my arms and yelled, "Run, run!" She doesn't stop until I begin to run. I slowed down to get up the porch steps safely, and she yelled again. She actually reminded me to run when I slowed down. She didn't stop until we got inside, and she ran to her grandmother, and I explained what happened. I made my aunt walk me back home because I was too freaked out to go alone. Was it just a kid's overactive imagination that managed to freak me out? Or do you think she actually saw something bad and was warning me to run so we could get to safety? What do you guys think? I'm at a loss here. I live in Madagascar, that island on the east of Africa. A lot of people here still believe in magic, sorcery, and all that stuff, despite being a big Christian country. My dad died in 2002, and he lived and experienced a lot of things in his life. He was a Christian and didn't believe in witchcraft and magic stuff, although he experienced a very strange thing back in the 80s. My mom and an aunt did confirm this story. In 1985, before I was even born, my dad caught pneumonia and was rushed to the hospital. My mom and an auntie were there to look for him, buying medics, etc. My uncle knew things about black magic and traditional Malagasy witchcraft. When he once visited my dad on the 4th or 5th day in the hospital, he told him something. He gave him a piece of ginger and asked him to keep it in his hand for the next 2 days. My dad asked why, and my uncle told him that in the next 2 days, an evil person who wanted to hurt him, or even worse, will come to visit him in his hospital room. Holding that piece of ginger will keep the evil person away. My dad didn't believe a single word of what he said, but Mom insisted on doing it because she knew my uncle was really serious about it. So, my dad kept the ginger in his hand for 2 days. The very next day, while he and my mum were in the room, someone knocked at the door. My mum opened it, and one of my dad's co-workers and friends was there with some flowers. My mum told him to enter, but the guy stayed right there, and then said that finally he won't enter the room. My dad saw him and told him to enter, but he was standing in the threshold, not moving. And then he turned back and went away quickly without saying goodbye. Later, when my dad was back to work, his co-worker and friend were not working with him anymore, and my dad never saw him again. This story happened in 2001. I was 14 years old at the time. I live in Madagascar, and I like to tell you that a lot of strange things happen in everyday life here. One day, the mother of my friend lost her expensive handbag, with valuables also in it. She really loved that handbag and she desperately wanted to find it. So, one person told her that somewhere, an old lady could find anything that you've lost. She had some kind of supernatural sense to find anything, especially when stolen. So my friend, his mum and I went to this lady. Her house was like 10 kilometers from my friend's house, and none of us had ever seen this old woman. My friend and I stayed in the car while his mum went inside the lady's house. When she came back, she told us that the lady gave her an exact description of where the bag was. She said, "You lost your bag at home. The day you lost it, there were 3 people in the house. A young kid, an older kid, and you. The younger kid stole the bag. Close to your house, there is a house where an old man lives. The young kids often stay in that house. There is a dog in this property. The bag is inside the dog's house." The old lady even gave a physical description of my friend and his young cousin, who was in their house the day the bag disappeared. The house she was talking about was the house of the kid's grandfather. We went directly to that house immediately after seeing the lady, and the bag was where she said it was. It was fucking insane. The bag was right there in the dog's house, with everything in it except the money, like the lady said. That was unbelievable. The old lady was living 10 kilometers away from that neighborhood. Neither my friend, his mom, or me had ever heard her talk about it. It was a very old lady who could barely walk, so it was impossible for her to know the face of my friend and his cousin, and even what happened that day. His cousin was like 10 or 11 years old, and neither him or his family could have known the existence of that woman. I don't know how that lady could know all that stuff. And when we were at the lady's house, there was a goddamn queue to see her. There were like 15 people waiting to see her, to ask her to look for lost things. And the funny thing is that she didn't even ask for money. You give what you want. Some people give money, others give gifts, and others give nothing, as she said. It was the most insane and unexplainable thing I ever experienced. Here in Madagascar, we have a tradition called tromba. It is a possession provoked. It's not a possession by demons or the devil. The person is possessed by another person who died previously. People here often practice this ritual to ask questions to their ancestors or a person who died recently. One day in 2012, I was invited to one of these tromba. My mom spent her childhood in the west coast of Madagascar, where people practice tromba very often. She witnessed a lot of them in her early life. So one day, when we were on holiday in the west coast, she asked us if we could like to see a tromba. At first I was afraid, but finally my brother and 2 cousins followed my mom to watch one. The ritual is simple. The sorcerer chooses one person to be the host, and then he summons the spirit to enter this host, and the conversation can begin. This time, the tromba happened in a remote village. There wasn't even electricity in the small town. The chosen host was an old lady, a very old one, maybe in her 70s. After the summoning, the old lady started to have convulsions like an epilepsy crisis. Then everything stops. So, she started to smoke cigarettes. A ton of cigarettes. She was smoking like 3 cigarettes at the same time. She also drank a lot of alcohol, very heavy rum, but she never seemed to be drunk. Then she started to talk. Oh my god, it was a goddamn man's voice. I was sure at that moment that she was faking it, like imitating a male voice, but when she started to climb a tree, I almost shat my pants. When she began the ritual, she could barely walk, but now she was in a mango tree at maybe 3 meters from the ground at least, after drinking something like half a litre of heavy old rum. And I didn't mention that she was speaking fucking English. In a remote village where there isn't even a school, she was able to speak English. My mum told me it was the spirit of a British sailor from the 18th century that was summoned. Currently my boys are 8 and 6. At the time they were like 4 and 2. We had been living in one place for about 5 or 6 months, and my oldest kept walking to the corner, looking up and talking. Then, after a few times he walked over, grabbed his brother by the hand and walked him to the corner. He also looked up and started talking, and they were both smiling and giggling like an adult was interacting with them. After my youngest's 3rd trip over, I asked, "What in the world are you two doing?" thinking it was some kind of game. My oldest giggled and said, "I'm talking to Grandpa." "Baby, your grandpa lives in Nebraska. He's very far away." The younger son was talking, pointing and laughing at the corner. The older son was laughing and said, "No, Mommy, it's your grandpa." As I said, my oldest was still doing a lot of babbling, so for him to suddenly speak so clearly and in a completely coherent thought was very unnerving. I look at the corner. Both boys are talking and showing toys up to the corner. I watch for a few minutes. This all happened over a grand total of 30 minutes. Babies, come watch your movie so Mommy can fix dinner. Younger son waddles over and sits back down. Older son picks up the toys that had accumulated in the corner and, holy shit, put them away, then went and sat next to his brother. I start dinner and I keep looking at the corner. Shot in the dark. Thanks, Grandpa. The door in the corner fell open like someone walked through it, and there was a heightened feeling in the room afterwards. That night, I had a dream of my childhood home, and on the path back to the woods, there was a small building. Granite, like a mausoleum, but was little more than an awning. One wall that held a door, 4 pillars, and a bench swing. I walked to it and lit incense and sat on the swing, started rocking, staring at the ground. Then they were there. Those old ratty sneakers. My grandpa was sitting next to me with that smile. Sitting on the swing, I just started talking, mostly about the boys. Told him I missed him, so much so that I named my eldest after him. He just sat and listened with that smile on his face. After a while, we both stood up. I hugged him and told him I hadn't told him everything yet. Then my name was called from elsewhere. I looked around, didn't see anyone, looked back and he was gone. I yanked the door open and it went into its vertical shaft, endless in both directions, completely lined with doors. I woke up crying and in a panic attack. My grandfather died somewhere along 2004 or 5. My grandmother in 2008. My son was born in 2010, just 1 week shy of my grandfather's birthday. My ex and I were managing and maintaining an old apartment building. Tenant in Unit 16 gets tossed. We go to Pret for showings. Tearing up carpets, paint and epoxy the tub, paint, garbage, etc. I came across this vase sitting by the support beam. Nothing wrong with it. Too nice to throw out. Decorated with roses and cherubs. I said, "What should I do with this vase? I don't see a reason to toss it." The ex said, "The one sitting on the floor? Put it back in the kitchen where I left it." Odd statement, but my ex has a funny way of processing info, so I put it back in the kitchen. We worked a couple more hours, took all the tools and cleaning supplies with us, left the vase in the kitchen, locked the door and went home for the night. Come back the next day to finish up, final touch-ups. The vase is back on the floor. Double check the key ring. We have both sets that the tenants surrendered. Picked it up, put it back in the kitchen and pressed on. Changed the lock, new doorknob, new deadbolt, new keys. A week or so later, an awesome new tenant takes the place. Vase is nowhere to be found during the walkthrough. Sign the lease, give him the keys and press on. 3 days after moving in, the tenant knocks on our door. "Can I get a new lock for my door?" "You just replaced it." "It is a new lock, but yeah, we can do that." "Everything okay?" "I think someone has been in my place, but nothing has been taken. Thanks." Next day, the tenant comes home. A new lock gets installed in front of him, so he knows there's nothing sketchy. Lock works. Everyone is happy. I started hanging out with the tenants because everyone else in the area sucked. I dropped my ass on the couch, and what do I see sitting by the TV? That vase. "So, what made you think someone had been in here when you asked for a new lock, if nothing was taken?" "That vase. I came home, and it was sitting right here on my coffee table." A year or so passes. I'm decent friends with a guy who's 16. Always keeps the door locked, even when he's home. Video games, nerd shit, music, people, etc. I've seen some shit in this building, and I'm comfortable enough to ask if he's seen anything other than the vase, which was still on the TV. He tells me about a woman in white, how he's been placed in the hallway and climbing the stairs, children's voices in his kitchen, and cold spots. Tenant said, "And that shit right there is driving me nuts too. I locked that door behind you, knob and the bolt. The door just opened." Sure enough, the door was halfway open. He goes on about the door opening itself after he's locked it. I've seen this door just click and fall open after I've locked it. It's happened in front of a lot of people. He frequently had guests. Said he even came home a few times to find his door just sitting open. I don't know if you've ever had to deal with tenants, but they get jumpy when they find their doors open and instant distrust of maintenance. So I took the master copy off the main keyring and kept it with me at all times. Shit still happened. After a while, it started to escalate. Things were moved, things were missing. Holmes started really to get nervous. So I started doing my own rounds, walkthroughs, and made sure his door was closed and locked. Never found it open or unlocked, without explanation. At this point, when we were hanging out, the door would unlock, open, and then something would either fall off the wall or off a shelf right there in front of everyone. He was there for maybe 2 years before he was happy to hand his keys over. Asked what he did with the vase. Said he left it in the kitchen. I'm not about to fuck with it. Did a walk through the next day. He was sitting by the beam. Saturday morning, my friend leaves for work and I go take a shower. I don't close the curtain all the way. I keep seeing a dark-haired woman peeking past. Saturday midday, I'm alone in the apartment and I keep hearing the door, like someone is struggling against the chain. I hear footsteps in the hallway and kitchen. Saturday night, we're laying in bed heavily asleep. I hear the bedroom door shut and I see a shadow on the floor in the gap underneath. Footsteps go down the hall. Dishes shift and rattle in the sink. Steps move out of the living room and stop right by the door. Sunday, my friend D tells me randomly about this little statue that was given to his roommate M by a witch, that something is attached to it. Other people in the building have spoken of a woman being seen and sourceless noises heard. He says M wants to throw it out. Having some experience in these matters, I advised against it. Tuesday midday, I just cannot stay awake for anything. I have a nightmare. D, M and I are in the kitchen discussing the statue. I excuse myself to shower. I close the door, turn the water on, undress, open the curtain to find the water off and the shower head turns. I correct it and hear the door behind me. I press the door closed again and I catch a sight in the mirror. A lock of hair is standing up. I watch in the mirror as it keeps lifting and falling like someone is playing with it. I call out for D and suddenly I am slammed in the shower. I wake up as I scream for D. I'm alone in the apartment. When D came home from work, I told him of the nightmare but didn't go into detail. He said he was going to smash it and went towards it. I protested. He didn't argue. This evening, I took some photos of the statue. I don't know what I was expecting. In the photos I took, I noticed a change in a school picture that's sitting by the statue. The hairline on the child was different in the 2 photos I took. They were perhaps 3 seconds apart, taken from the same place and position. Just to make sure I wasn't seeing things, I sent the photos to a few friends with no context other than find the difference. While I've had several experiences with the paranormal, I've never had nightmares in tandem with them. And the presence feels heavy in a sense. Like, you know when someone is really mad at you and they come into the same room, but they don't say anything to you and actively avoid eye contact? Feels like that. Nor have I had something like this happen with pictures. I know some of this sounds horrendously cliche, but it's true. Any inputs anyone has is appreciated. My boys were 2 and 4 at the time. My oldest, CC, is a runner. If he wanted to go, there was little that could be done to stop him, so he was frequently dipping out the door and running through the building. I was looking for CC as he had been quiet for far too long and didn't answer me.
On this particular day, my ex, D, had just stepped into our apartment to ask me about some work I had done the night before in an empty unit. He was standing in the doorway and I watched a little boy dart behind him and up the stairs. God damn it, CC! I pushed past D, and as the steps continue around and landing and up the next flight, I got halfway up the bottom set when D stops me. Where are you going? Did you not just see CC run up the stairs? The stairs were less than 2 feet from the door. Both boys are right here. They poked their heads around the door frame. They just came out from under the couch. Then, who just ran up the stairs? I could have sworn he just ran out of the back room, past you, and all the way up the stairs. Well, it wasn't CC. What did he look like? He looked exactly like CC. Yay tall, blonde hair, and he was wearing brown. So, you see him too? End of that conversation. I don't know how many times I killed myself running up 3 flights of stairs, chasing that little boy, thinking my son had slipped out. We had the only kids in the building. Couldn't be a neighbourhood kid. You needed keys to get in. D, sometime later, informed me that when he would be working at night in the units, or on days when all the tenants were out, he would hear giggling and the doors would close. His tools and keys would be moved if he left the room. Word in the neighbourhood was that the building was once an orphanage belonging to the church next door. Being a softie for kids, D would ask that his tools and key please be put back, and he would leave the room, find something to do for a few minutes, and when he came back, his stuff had been returned. In 2009, I studied in a Catholic school known to be so old that it has its own urban legends and ghost stories. One day, after PE class, I needed to pee, but the nearest ladies' room for the soccer field was occupied with people changing into PE uniforms, so I had to run to the main building and look there. Now, the main building is the oldest structure on campus, and it's basically a building surrounding another building, so the layout was quite confusing. I ran around the ground floor until I found a small ladies' room, with 2 cubicles only and a small mirror and sink by the wall. This was the smallest public ladies' room I'd ever been in, but not the time for me to be choosy, as I really needed to pee. Once I'm done, I went out of the cubicle and was surprised to see 2 nuns standing by the mirror. Not really a big deal for me, as I was in a Catholic school, and there are priests and nuns everywhere. But it was just quiet, so I didn't think there'd be anyone else around. Now, these 2 nuns also looked quite surprised to see me, so I just excused myself and squeezed myself between them to wash my hands. I then bowed to them and left, as I'm not comfortable in this small room, and their silence is not helping either. As I was browsing urban legends, I remembered an urban legend in that school. The first one is about a ladies' room in the main building, where people inside cubicles used to see rotting feet hanging from the ceiling, as if someone hanged themselves there. The second is about a ghost nun who would show itself in the ladies' room, and if you see this nun and you start to pray, this nun will imitate you and say the prayer word for word in your face too. So now, looking back, I was actually wondering why the nuns were surprised to see me, and how the hell I did not hear them go inside or even move inside that small room. I'm just thankful that they looked human and might really be human, and that I might just be scaring myself now. I've always been enthusiastic about the paranormal, because I like the mystery behind unexplainable things, and maybe also partly because I haven't actually seen a ghost, so I'm not scared. Now, since I'm curious, I asked my younger cousin if he has ever seen a demon or the like. This cousin of mine has been telling his parents that he can see people who aren't there since he was young, and we actually started to believe him when he ran out of their house naked and frantic and into my other aunt's house because he saw what looked like a woman figure, though no face, by the bathroom window. So back to my question on what demons look like. My cousin said that he has no idea what a demon looks like, although he saw a dark presence that to him was closest to one. He was about 12 at the time, playing hide and seek in their school grounds just before sunset, and he was hiding behind a tree when he saw this dark presence. To him, it was the darkest void he ever saw. If anything could be blacker than black, he said that was it. He said it had no face, no discernible shape or body part, that it was just a mass of blackness. It wasn't moving, but when my cousin saw it, he froze from fear and actually admitted that he wanted to cry on the spot. He said it gave off a very bad feeling, and he felt as if his life was in danger, but he couldn't move to run. He only came back to his senses when a playmate tapped him, and he ran home as fast as he could. Since that day, he's never played by the school grounds after class ever again, as their school is also known for all sorts of paranormal activities. Even my aunts, who were teachers, affirmed this. The sun's setting now, and most family and friends have left. But here I am, staring at freshly dumped dirt, stopping myself from hugging the ground, wishing for the earth to gobble me up so I can be forever with him. Yes, him, Chen, my best friend, my first crush, my first boyfriend, and now my very first heartache. It's only our consolation that he passed away in our sleep, so at least there's no pain. He's gone, and I can't make myself leave his grave, as I can't admit to myself that I'll never see him again if I do. So here I stand. Hey, my grandmother came up to me and held my arm. We're going home now. You can stay if you want. Just don't forget to buy me some ointment on your way home. Then she hugged me and left with my parents. Just don't forget to buy me some ointment on your way home. Grandma knows so well that I don't believe in superstitions, so she subtly asked me to buy her some ointment so I don't go straight home from the funeral. But somehow, those words felt like a suggestion to me. As the superstition goes, if you come from a wake or funeral, don't go straight home, or else the soul of the deceased will follow you. It's called pagpapangap in our native tongue, which loosely translates to shaking off, as in literally shaking off bad juju somewhere else before heading home. But what is there to lose in this scenario? It's a superstition, so more or less it's unreal. And if it's real, then I get more time to be with him, only if in spirit. I then found my courage and walked the path out of the cemetery and stared at my phone, contemplating where to put my Uber destination. Home, or just the closest convenience store or pharmacy. Grandma will surely nag me over and do some nasty rituals if I don't have a ointment when I come home, so I decided to put the convenience store as my destination. My Uber arrived shortly, and before I could breathe from the memories with Chen flashing through my eyes, we arrived at the store. Outside, I met Dave, Chen's third-grade cousin, who had come to the funeral and went to the same convenience store with his family to do the pagpapagbag. As soon as I got the ointment, I did my goodbye to Dave, as I don't want to converse with anybody else. I don't want to share the pain, the sadness, the loss of it all. I arrived home with Grandma, sitting on her favourite chair on our porch, and I saw her smile when I gave her the ointment. I then went to my room, changed my clothes and went to sleep, alternating between tears and ugly sobbing, hoping I'll dream of Chen one more time. Flick. Flick. I woke up to the sound of pebbles hitting my windows. My eyes are swollen from crying and sleeping, and I decided not to wake up until something dawned on me. Flick. It's Chen. It's how he sneaks up to my room back in the day. First he'd throw stones at my window to wake me up. Then he'd climb up and sneak through my window to get to my room. I was both excited and scared as I got up and walked towards the window. I looked down as my room's on the second floor, but no one was there. I opened the window and waited, but felt nothing coming through. I kept the window open that night. The next morning, I have a hammering headache and puffy eyes. We got sunny side up eggs and bacon for breakfast, and for some reason, I can't taste a thing. So I went looking for salt. If you're looking for salt, go ask Mama, my mother said, pertaining to my grandmother. Before I could ask why, I saw Grandma by the window, hugging a small sack and pouring salt around the house. What was that for? I asked my mother, and I'm honestly thinking that Grandma was going nuts. Last night, she said she heard a rustling outside her window, and the crickets went silent, so she's sure there was a spirit lurking outside our house. She said she cursed the spirit and threw salt out her window for it to go away, and it did, as the crickets were chirping again. Mom replied, "There's a spirit lurking outside our house." So the superstition must be true then. Chen might have really come home with me. Why? Because I didn't go inside the convenience store? Dave was there, so I asked him to buy the ointment for me while I waited on the road. I went straight home after the funeral. I went to school like nothing happened, and when I came home later that day, I still saw the solid path of salt that Grandma laid. I went around the house and smudged off the portion of salt path right below my window so that Chen could find his way to me. Luckily, Grandma didn't notice, and I happily waited for Chen to come. Flick, flick. As expected, I was awakened by pebbles hitting my window. I ran and opened it and felt the wind rush through my room. If I could embrace the wind, I would, because I know it's Chen. Knock, knock. Is everything all right, Cynthia? I heard Grandma knock and call from the other side of my door, to which I replied, "Yes, it's just the wind." I then heard my closet doors open and close, and I laughed, as this was really how Chen was when he sneaks. He'd go into my closet when someone's about to go to my room, and he'd stay there until we're clear. Tonight, I'm feeling better than ever, and my heart is warm knowing that Chen is here with me. As I lay in bed, I felt the mattress shift, as if someone was crawling on it. My cheeks felt so warm, and the warmth stretched to my neck, but now it felt like burning. I'm being choked by this burning sensation, and I can't get it off. I'm struggling and wringing my arms around, but there's nothing I can hold on to. I could no longer breathe, and as my eyes were about to close, I caught a glimpse of what was above me. A burnt lady with charcoal-coloured hair. Her eyes were bloodshot red, and her hands and arms were like charcoal still in flame, burning and choking me. I came to my senses, gasping for breath, and Grandma and my parents were around me, shaking me to come back to life. They said I was wailing and struggling, but I wouldn't wake up, and from time to time, I was scratching my neck, as if removing something there. I met Dave earlier today, and he said he bought the ointment for you, Grandma finally told me, as I calmed down. Do you know why we perform pag-pag? She asked further, while combing my hair with her fingers. It's because we don't know whose soul will come home with us. I touched my neck and tried to remember what I saw. It was not Chen. My boyfriend passed away, and I did a stupid thing. Now, maybe something else came home with me. I watched my grandma do her own cleansing of the house. She has this small but deep iron pan that she fills with burning charcoal, and she puts yellow and white crystals on top of the coal to burn with it. The intention was to fill the whole house with smoke, in the hope to purge out the bad spirit. Loot is what she calls it, very much like fumigation. And the smoke smells calming, and oddly enough, it doesn't hurt my eyes, so it doesn't really bother me at all. Looking back, it was selfish of me to want to bring Chen home with me, since that means he won't get eternal rest, or we won't get reincarnated. The next morning, I asked Grandma to come with me and apologise to Chen's family about my mistake, a move to give me peace and show my penance. Fortunately, they understood what I did, as we all missed Chen, and told me I've been forgiven. We were about to go home when Aunt Nana, Chen's mother, pulled me by my right shoulder and stared at my neck. Those marks, Aunt Nana said, almost tearfully. Chen has those marks too. She was talking about the burnt choking marks on my neck. Chen was holding his neck when he saw him lifeless, she continued, and began sobbing. A lot of things rushed in my mind while Grandma talked to Aunt Nana to calm her down. What if Chen didn't die peacefully in his sleep? What if whatever I saw last night killed him, just like how it attempted to do with me? If this thing caught him, will he ever find peace? Who was this burnt lady, and what does she want with us? Before we left Chen's house, Grandma performed her loop, and Aunt Nana burned some incense for Chen's peace. She also created a salt path around the house for added peace of mind. Grandma, I called while walking on our way home. Yes? If whatever choked me down last night killed Chen, what will happen to him? What will happen to me? I asked and stopped in my tracks. With all the superstitions and rituals she knows and follows, she must know something for this. She sighed and looked back to me in her sincerest ways. There are some things we can counter and some things we should not meddle with. She held my hand and pulled me so we could start walking again. We can counter whatever's on you right now. We can do all the rituals that we have and hope that it goes away. Then she stopped, but didn't face me. Her eyes remained focused on the clouds as she gripped my hand tightly while saying, As for Chen's soul, we shouldn't meddle. We can pray for him, burn incense and appease the gods and all, but we should never meddle with life and death. I skipped school today and followed every single ritual that Grandma asked me to do. I bathed in salted water. I helped her lay the salt path around the house. We even put salt lines by our windowsill. She did her paglaluto again by sundown, and she gave me a rosary to put under my pillow. Grandma is a Catholic, but her father, bless his soul, was a shaman, and she inherited his book of healing and rituals with his passing. It's a weird mix of strict religion and traditional wisdom, but if it works, it works. That night, I left my lights on and I even drank a cup of salted water. If my kidney fails, at least my soul might be saved. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up and browsed Instagram, but it aches to see goodbye posts and memories for Chen by our mutual friends. So I stayed off and went out of my room just to have a midnight snack. By the kitchen counter, I saw Grandma's iron pan, and beside it the jar full of crystals and the book of rituals. I grabbed the book, browsed it, and saw that it's both Tagalog and Latin. The first few pages were about herbs, what they cure and when and where to find them. Then the rituals to diagnose whatever spirit or entity attached itself to a person or thing. The rituals to purge and the rituals to communicate. The rituals to communicate. If it's in a ritual book, and if the rules are laid out pretty strictly, then maybe it's safe to follow. Maybe I can communicate with Chen to know how he's doing. Reading the instructions and other notes, the ritual includes what looks like astral projection, meaning my soul would need to leave my body so that I could go where the dearly departed are. All in all, what I only needed was an item that belongs to whoever I want to contact, and a few phrases that will put the projection in action. If I want to get back to my body, I just simply touch it. Fair enough. Easy enough. Now what I only need is an item from him, and it'll be easy, since I volunteered to help Aunt Nana store away Chen's belongings tomorrow. So I took a picture of the ritual page, just in case Grandma hides the book tomorrow, and I went to my room to try and get some sleep. Morning came and I went to school, and that afternoon I went straight to Chen's house to help Aunt Nana store Chen's items. I managed to take home with me Chen's favourite black and grey t-shirt, and I just waited for everyone in the house to sleep, to perform a ritual. I also know that I'd be safe since I helped Grandma with the salt path, the salt line by our windowsills, and I even drank the salted water. I promised myself that this is the last thing I would do for Chen, that I'll only do this to know if he is well in the afterlife. 2 a.m. came, and I knew it was time. I wore Chen's shirt and chanted the required phrases. Slowly, I left my soul being ripped from my body, as if I was riding a Viking's boat, and my body was being ripped into two from the push and pull motion. Oh God, it burns. Somehow my soul was thrown from my body, as if being kicked out and expelled from a door. I looked back, and I only looked asleep, so I proceeded to do my original plan. I must look for Chen. I went out of my bedroom and was immediately attracted to the smell of the incense that we burnt earlier in the day. I was kind of dizzy walking inside our house, as if nothing was really solid in the spirit world, for it was all mist and lights. I finally managed to get out of our house, and I saw the salt path that we had made. In the spirit world, salt was glowing like polished gold, and it felt so warm and inviting. The salt path was no longer a path, though. From where the path was, a shimmering thin boundary rose, and maybe this was what prevented any bad spirit from coming through. I walked through without a problem, and I only felt fuzzy and really warm all over me. Now that I'm out, I just realised that here in the spirit world, it's odd, but there seems to be no time. It's not day or night, and there are souls wearing old clothing, and there are those wearing what looks like from the present time, all wandering about, as if not noticing each other. If Chen's soul is wandering, where would he be? Would he still be by the cemetery? Would he be by his house where he passed away? I was still lost in my thoughts when I saw Chen walking past me. I was almost shocked that I froze in my place, and I barely managed to snap out of my senses to follow him. He's in his school uniform, and he seems to be walking home. If souls could shed a tear, I would be crying a river, since my heart is pouring out from cherishing this moment, when Chen looks alive and well, just going by his daily routine. He went home and to his room, and laid down as if getting ready to sleep. When it looked as if he's asleep, I went closer to touch his cheek. He then opened his eyes and looked straight at me, as if in a dreamlike state, and I smiled and hugged him. "How are you? Are you well? I hope you find peace," I said as I hugged him and cried on his chest. I shed no tears, I know that, but I'm crying my heart out. I'm just so happy to be with him. Next thing I knew, he was struggling, as if trying to push me away from him. "Chen, what are you doing? It's me. Calm down." He must have been re-experiencing his death. He might be in the unending loop of the last moments of his life. I tried to calm him down. I tried to hold him, but he wouldn't calm down. "Chen, it's okay. It's over. You can rest in peace now." I kept on saying this while holding his face with my hands, trying to call him back to his senses. "Mom," he screamed with horror in his eyes. "Chen, look at me," I begged, and when he managed to look at me, I was horrified with what I saw in his eyes. Burnt skin and bloodshot eyes. But it's me. I'm the one with him now, not her. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice that Chen stopped struggling. My hands, which were in his face, were now on his neck, and my fair hands are now burning black and red like charcoal. I lifted my hands, and burn marks appeared on his neck, along with the bruises. Then and there, Aunt Nana entered his room and cried out the most horrifying scream I've ever heard. As I looked back at Chen, I realised he was not reliving his death. This exact moment was his death. I don't know what was happening, but I truly hope this was all a dream. I ran downstairs and saw Grandma performing her loop in Chen's house, which means that everything is happening simultaneously. There is no time. As the loop smoke reached me, I felt my eyes become warm, but I was not affected painfully, so I thought it was all fine, until I faced a mirror. With each smoke that passes through me, my eyes spill blood. My skin ruptures with fire, but I still feel only warmth. Now there was a salt barrier around Chen's house, but what's the use of anything? I ran through it and felt for the first time pain, as if I was being stabbed by 1,000 flaming needles per inch of my body. Chen's black and grey t-shirt was now as dark as charcoal, and if material things could burn in the spirit world, it would burn with me. I came back to our house with every intent to go back to my body, and I saw the salt barrier again. I tried to run through it, but my face and arms burned so hard that I fell back to the bush behind our house. Grandma looked out her window and she threw salt in my direction. This was the night of the funeral. It all dawned on me now. If my soul has layers, then it would peel and burn one by one, starting from the salted water inside my body, from the salt bath, from the rituals inside our houses, and eventually there'll come a time when only one layer will be left, and I'll have no soul to spare. I was losing hope when I saw myself inside my bedroom, walking around, sobbing, and for sure, it was another time. I threw pebbles at my window. I opened it like clockwork, but I cannot pass the salt barrier without turning myself to ashes this time around. Like watching a stage play, I saw myself walking and breaking the salt path, to which I rushed and climbed up the window. I saw myself standing by the window, and I know this nightmare will end soon. If I can just touch my body, but myself rushed towards the door, hearing Grandma knock on it. With all the strength that I have, I ran into the window but stumbled, and I needed to grab the closet doors just to stand up. My soul is definitely drying up. As I was able to stand up, I climbed up the bed, saw myself and touched my face, but nothing was happening. I cannot come back. I touched my face again, then my neck, then my head, but nothing was happening. In my panic, I tried to shake my other self, but I cannot come through. I saw myself struggling and realised that this was the first moment when I saw the burnt lady. Myself and I met eye to eye, and I saw the horror in her eyes. I'm in pain. I'm in rage. I'm turning to ashes and I cannot come back. Is it the salt bath? Is it the salted water that I took? Swoosh! Grandma came in and threw salt at me, and I almost thought that my soul was going to turn to ash. Luckily, it didn't, and I managed to hide under my bed. I heard my family try to wake my other self up, and everything went like clockwork. I hid until I was at the exact moment I left my body, and with what was left of my soul. I tried so hard to come back to an empty body on my bed. Crawling from under the bed, I touched my foot and was able to return to my body. But it feels different now. It feels like my burnt soul fits loosely within my body, and I find it hard to move. I cannot feel my arms and hands, and I cannot move a muscle on my face. I screamed with my throat, and I realised that I can still move my legs. I struggle to get up. I hit my door with my body so as to make a sound. Fortunately, my grandma is a light sleeper, and she came rushing to my room. She stared at me, and her face looked like she knew what had happened. She yelled for my parents, and I saw them coming before losing consciousness. About 6 months have passed since everything happened, and it took a lot of physical therapy sessions before I could properly move my hands and arms again. My face looked as if I'd suffered a stroke, and a stroke is also what made my parents believe to have happened. Only Grandma and I knew what really happened that night. I dare not touch her book of rituals again. I'm typing this the first time I got control of my finger muscles, so as to warn other people not to follow what I've done. In my most desperate moment, I thought I was helping a loved one, but it turned out I caused his demise. I understand now what Grandma said. We should never meddle with life and death. I'm just not sure what happened. I just want to explain first that I am someone that likes to be scared. I enjoy abandoned buildings and homes, the feeling of walking into pitch black rooms. Not being able to see anything in front of you is just a good adrenaline feeling for me. Just trying to explain that I don't fear the dark and like pushing my mental boundaries. Anyway, this happened a year or so back. I was renting a suite that was on a very large property. All flat farming fields with nothing growing on them across from my front door. That was on the side of this massive house was a barn. The barn had floodlights on the top that would go off if anything went in front of it, and would light up the space between my door and the barn. Anyway, I was out there smoking a joint, and all of a sudden, I would see something moving towards me from the field, towards the middle part of the barn and my place. I couldn't see anything except the movement of it until it came into the moonlight, and I'm unsure how to exactly explain it, but this is my best attempt. It was like a ball of black with almost tentacles or wavy arms coming off it. I still can't really see it. It's almost like it was darker than the actual darkness, but that made it somewhat more visible against the barn behind it. I remember kind of getting down on one knee, kind of like a hunter stance to try and see better, in a kind of shock at what I was seeing. All of a sudden, back a bit further from the field, a very small in size but super bright light shined in my face. Wasn't like blinding at all, was legit, more like a small little mag light flashlight. As soon as it hit me, I just tossed my joint and hopped in my door, locking it behind me. I went to my room facing that direction, grabbed my gun, and looked out my window. All in all, it was a super weird experience because those balls of black masses were messed up by themselves. But then it was like a human shined a light in my face. It was a super odd experience.